Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute nuts and bolts of the green transition. We are going to look at how a massive, high-level state blueprint for tackling climate change actually translates all the way down to the ground-level data of a rapidly expanding industry, EV charging. It's a pretty wild journey, from billions of dollars in policy investment straight down to the pavement where the physical hardware is finally getting plugged in.
Here is how we're going to break this down today. 1. The innovation gap. 2. The Massachusetts blueprint. 3. The EV charging boom. And finally, 4. The era of execution.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the innovation gap.
Okay, we need to confront a pretty startling reality about our global climate goals. When we talk about reaching net zero by 2050, there's this assumption that we have all the tools ready to go, and we just need to, build them. But according to a recent really comprehensive strategy report from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, the MassCEC, 34% of the emissions reductions required to hit those global net zero targets will rely on technology that isn't even on the market yet. Think about that for a second. More than a third of our path to a sustainable future depends on breakthrough innovations that haven't even been commercialized. So this massive innovation gap leaves us with a huge question. How exactly do you strategically fund and scale an industry that is literally still inventing its own foundational tools? I mean, you can't just mandate a transition if the tech isn't there to support it. You have to actively build the ecosystem that creates that tech in the first place.
Which brings us nicely to part 2, the Massachusetts blueprint. To see exactly how you build that kind of ecosystem, let's look at Massachusetts as a prime example. They already boast the second largest climate tech ecosystem in the US. And get this, since 2019, a staggering $14 billion has been invested in this sector right there in the state. They're using deliberate, super concentrated investments to accelerate everything from huge offshore wind projects to industrial decarbonization and grid efficiency. They're playing to win, treating climate tech exactly the same way they treated their massive life sciences boom a decade ago.
And the sheer scale of their new 10-year implementation plan is just wow. The MassCEC isn't just tweaking a few policies around the margins, they are driving a full-on industrial mobilization. Over the next decade, their strategy is projected to support 1,300 climate tech companies, train 25,000 individuals, and create 35,000 brand new jobs. Plus, their funding is designed to act like a magnet, expected to attract 7 times that amount in additional private and federal capital. That is absolutely what a blueprint for ecosystem dominance looks like.
But, blueprints and billion-dollar projections are one thing. They're just on paper. What does it actually look like when state and private capital rapidly scale a green subsector out in the real world? How does all this massive investment physically show up on our streets?
Let's transition over to part 3 to find out the EV charging boom.
So let's bring it from that 30,000-foot policy view right down to the pavement. To understand the reality of this rollout, we're going to dive into the Q1 2026 EV charging network benchmarking data from Parent. EV charging is undeniably one of the most visible and highly contested sectors in this whole transition. And as of the first quarter of 2026, there are exactly 73,394 direct current fast charging, or DCFC, ports active across the United States. This is a booming, highly competitive infrastructure network expanding every single day.
And this brilliantly illustrates the cutthroat race happening right now. While Tesla is still at the top of new quarterly deployments with 880 ports, look at these new entrants. Iona and Red-E have absolutely exploded onto the scene, vaulting right into the top 3 deployers nationwide. In fact, according to the Parent report, 6 of the top 10 US deployers this quarter weren't even in the top 10 a year ago. The competitive field is literally wider than ever before.
Because of this massive influx of new players, we are witnessing a real structural shift in the market. Tesla's share of new quarterly deployments has dropped to 26%. Just a year prior, they were regularly above 40%. Now, Tesla obviously still controls just over half of the all-time installed base, but they are no longer the single driver of incremental market growth. Look at the other networks category, this massive 53.1% chunk. This shows that fragmented operators and new entrants are collectively taking over the expansion of the grid.
Meanwhile, it's not just about who is building the chargers, it's about how they're building them. Non-Tesla networks have increased their station sizes to an average of 4.6 ports per station in the US, up from 3.7 the previous year.
So operators are moving away from simply planting a single flag on a map just to claim a spot. Instead, they're building out larger hubs to maximize actual throughput and handle real volume. For the everyday driver, this is great news. It means fewer lines, way more reliability, and just a better overall charging experience. The hardware itself is also maturing incredibly fast. 250 plus kilowatt ultra-fast charging, the kind that can add hundreds of miles of range in just minutes, is now the undisputed standard. It makes up 67% of all US fast charging ports. Slower, sub-150 kilowatt chargers have dropped to represent only 21% of new installs. And perhaps the most interesting takeaway for the consumer here, despite all this massive capital expenditure and hardware upgrading, the average US cost held completely flat at 53 cents per kilowatt hour. Operators are clearly finding efficiency at scale. Yet, right in the middle of this massive infrastructure boom, a battle is still raging over standard plug types, the old format war. The battle between the Combined Charging System, or CCS, and the North American Charging Standard, or NACS, continues to shape the physical landscape out there. Now, despite a lot of industry hype and media coverage telling us that the NACS standard is completely taking over, the hard data from Q1 2026 tells a much more nuanced story. CCS still absolutely dominates the installed base, commanding a massive 74% share of all US ports. But even more surprisingly, non-Tesla operators are actually continuing to deploy CCS chargers at 3.5 times the pace of NACS. NACS only accounted for 21% of new US ports this quarter. So the gap in the physical base is actually widening in favor of CCS right now, even as car manufacturers are transitioning their upcoming models to NACS. Pretty wild. Let's wrap this up with part 4, the era of execution. So what does this all mean for the companies actually competing out there? We've seen the big policy blueprints, and we've seen the raw data on the ground. It brings us perfectly to this quote from the parent report: "Execution is the differentiator." Think about what the data just showed us. Power levels are converging. Pricing is stabilized. The hardware is standardizing. Because of that, a network's competitive advantage no longer comes from simply having a fast charger. It comes down entirely to execution, maintaining incredible uptime so the charger actually works when you pull up, managing grid loads efficiently, and making smart data-driven decisions on exactly where to place those sites. Which leaves us with this final thought. We are officially in the execution era. Whether we're talking about a state like Massachusetts managing a $14 billion ecosystem to fill a massive innovation gap, or a private charging network just trying to out-deploy its rivals at a highway rest stop, the playing field has officially changed. The blueprint is drawn, the capital is flowing, the technology is rapidly maturing. So the only question left is, when the hype fades and the real work begins, who will actually be able to execute? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep an eye on those blueprints, and I'll catch you next time.